This is the Guns Magazine podcast quick hit episode number 54. Hi there, and welcome to this quick hit episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting people who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. Today's episode is another gathering of our resident gun cranks, myself, Roy Huntington, and American Handgunner editor Tom McHale. In this episode, we have a spirited debate over the pros and cons of using a red dot optic, especially on defensive pistols. However, before we get started, I would like to remind you that this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast is sponsored by our good friends at Kimber. Kimber was founded with the singular purpose of making every firearm the best it can possibly be, with a fit and finish that only practiced hands can achieve and appreciate. Whether you carry a Kimber for personal protection, hunting, or competition, know that their promise of quality without compromise is how they measure success. To learn more about Kimber firearms, visit kimberamerica.com. Well, red dot sights are certainly here to stay. Tom McHale is a huge proponent of the optics, while Roy Huntington and myself are mostly old dogs trying to learn new tricks with red dots. Let's listen in on our round-robin discussion of the pros and cons of red dot optics. We're going to talk about red dots. This is
I got one of those.
I got one of those, and Roy has. Oh, you're going to show that one.
Oh wait, I have an antique one. This is an ultra dot.
Lord,
I know. Look at that. That is kind of a like the biggie size and not biggie size or something. You know. Yeah.
That looks illegal in 47 states.
Yeah,
it's not. This is not a suppressed revolver. Okay, even I know that. Although it actually does work a little bit. It's a heavy barrel gun. It was a PPC gun. I built this in the late 80s. And this is one of the very earliest red dot sights that I could find. And I think I put this together, it was in the maybe early 90s. I can't remember for sure. It seems like it. And there you go. And everyone laughed at me and said, "That's stupid. No one's ever going to want to do that, man."
Well, it just goes to show you. I mean, I've kind of been saying this is the year of the red dot, but followed very closely by a disclaimer that they're nothing new on handguns. It's been decades.
No.
It's just becoming new for everyday use.
Yeah. Before we advance the conversation, though, that looks like something from Police Academy 5, you know?
Well, it kind of was, actually.
Come with me.
Or Total Recall, maybe.
Oh, that guy. Well, you know, we did a one. It was in the 80s, I think it was, and it was that 10-pound laser that they mounted on top of an MP5. Remember that?
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, we had those. But, you know, when I took over Handgunner, and so I was at the SHOT Show, which was probably 2001 or 2002 at the SHOT Show, I was talking with Mickey Fowler, you know, their competitor shooter, and I'd known Mickey for a little while. And we were in a booth doing something, I don't remember what, and he went, "Hey, let me show you this." And he pulls out like an officer's ACP size 1911, and on it was a little red dot TV sight. And it was one of the very early, like the first one. What was it, Dr. Optic? Was that what it was?
I
can't remember.
Yeah.
It was a horrific amount of money. It was like $800 in those days. And he had actually had someone cobble it together. And at those times, you had to turn it on with a button. And you had like about a 4-hour battery life on it. And so he showed it to me, and I picked it up, and I looked through it, and I couldn't see the red dot, of course. Right? I'd never done it before. And he showed me some holster he'd cobbled together, and I told him, I said, "Well, that's stupid. You know, what are you going to do with that?" And
I'm going to start out the argument and say right off the bat, okay, this is my TMT custom Glock, my favorite thin blue line. I've got the Trijicon SRO on it. But let me say, I know, Tom, you're a huge proponent of red dots, and I'm not against them. I'm not comfortable with them. After hundreds of thousands of pistol presentations, I still go for that front sight. So I'm trying to get there, but I'm still not super comfortable with it. So tell me why I should be super comfortable with it.
You're doing it exactly right. Not looking for the dot, going for the front sight. I mean, that's the whole. Once you start looking for the dot, it disappears. there's black holes or something out there that suck up the dot when you start looking for it. No, but seriously, you just forget the dot's there. Bring it up, look for your front sight, boom, presto. No delay. There's definitely an adjustment curve.
Yeah.
But why have one? Why have one? That's what I want to know. You get to make a case for red dots.
Oh, and you guys gang up on me? Is that how this is going to work?
I'll make a case for maybe not red dots.
Okay. Let's talk about two different elements of red dot use. One, simplified sight picture. So in the classic scenario, you got rear sight, front sight, and target over there somewhere, right? That's three things you're trying to line up all in a micro instant. Is that a thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, it's human eye. Your eye, no matter what it looks like in your brain, can only focus on one of those three things at a time. So we all say focus on the front side and everything else is a little blurry, the target and the rear sight, right? If it's not blurry, your brain's just switching back and forth between those three objects. But red dot, one thing. The dot is on the target. So you have one simplified focal point. So if you overcome the issue of finding that dot, you've got a much more simplified sight picture. Yeah. So that's. And go ahead. We'll hold on point two for a minute.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that I've reached that age. I've really started noticing this. That front sight, even when I'm focused on it real hard, it's not quite that distinct anymore. Mm-hmm. I just was at gun sight last week and shooting a gun I'd never shot, and it had a stock front sight that was abysmal, but I couldn't see it. So, and of course, people will get glasses. Well, I will one of these days, but I still should be able to see that front sight. So that's why I've suddenly realized maybe I do need to kind of work out this red dot thing.
Yeah.
Well, Brent, I know you've pointed a gun at bad guys. I certainly have. Tom, you may have. I don't know. But I will say that
only you.
So. Yeah, only me. I know there's those other times you point. But I can honestly say that in all of my years of being policeman, all the probably hundreds of times, it's not like TV. You pull your gun out a lot, nighttime traffic stops and whatnot. I never remember concentrating on my sights. My eyes were always on the threat. And maybe there are superhuman people who really do focus on their front sight when they're aiming their gun at a bad guy who's holding a knife or a gun. But I'm not one of those, because my body just goes binocular vision, focus on the threat, and that's where I can see a value of the red dot, because it's on the same plane as your threat. And so I agree with you 100%. I have tried to accomplish that same thing by simply indexing, like we all do, where you look kind of through the sights, so you index your gun on the target. And if it's out around 10 to 10, 12 yards or 15 yards, you're probably fine. You're going to hit what you're aiming at. But where I worry about the red dot sights, and I have some too, like you guys, I've been shooting them a lot now and experimenting with them and whatnot. And I often can't find it, or I find myself slowing down just that 0.2 of a second to kind of get that sight picture. And in the real world, you ever watch Jerry Michalik shoot? Jerry points the gun, the instant it's on target, the gun's going off. The instant it's on target. And in a defensive shooting, the instant you're on target, you need to be shooting, and that 0.2 of a second can be life or death, And so I don't know, can you overcome that with practice?
I have a question for you. So you say you're having a little trouble finding the dot. When you shoot, do you close your eyes? I mean, I know it's going to be noisy and loud and kind of scary, so I would assume you probably squinch your eyes shut when you pull the trigger. Could that be part of the problem, maybe?
That's funny. Wow. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'll close one eye," and it's like, no, not if there's a threat. Both eyes are going to be open. I don't care what you do. You watch go to YouTube and watch videos of cops in the middle of shootings, and you will see that they are looking at the target and both their eyes are open, no matter what's going on. I mean, I like them. I think if you get a smaller mil dot, like a 3 MOA mil dot, as opposed to like a 6 MOA mil dot, which I think for a defensive gun, it should be a 6 or an 8. or a 10.
Right.
Yeah, just a big red dot that you can see out there. But I think for a plinking target shooting, hunting handgun, I think it's hard to beat a red dot sight because you've got time to do it. But I'm still struggling for it on a defensive gun. I think there are people who can manage it. I'm not there yet. And I'm terrified of that hesitation of I can't see my red dot. And then even if you think, well, transition to your iron sights, you've already burned up a half a second or a second.
Yeah. That's what I always find myself doing is you kind of do that. Where's that damn sight? And I do think it's that muscle memory is the term everybody uses. That's not technically correct, but when I bring a pistol up, especially, I have, again, hundreds of thousands of presentations and shots. Even though there's a big piece of glass in the way, I still find myself like this one has the big golf ball front sight with the tritium insert. That's what I find myself going to. So I'm not saying that I'm against him. It is hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
I wonder, is it as simple as that? Yeah.
In all seriousness, I've done a good bit of, timing because I wanted to know, what does it take to really acclimate yourself to a red dot? And I found so far, and I'm still working with them, I'm actually just a hair slower at contact distances, 3 to 5 yards maybe, than I am without a red dot. But anything past 5 yards, I'm actually faster and more accurate. And I think it's that single plane sight picture, put the dot on the target and you're good to go, and there's a high degree of probability to, if that dot's where it's supposed to be and your trigger finger operates correctly, you're going to hit it. Right.
Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen some tests like that. And you're exactly right. The people are even experienced shooters. They seem to be faster up close with irons. But as soon as it gets out around 12, 15 yards or so, then they're actually faster with the dot sight. I think as long as you're able to index it, that's the big secret to me,
A couple of minutes ago, you offered up a great setup for my second point, which I want to come back to. And that's that the natural tendency of us human beings to focus on the target or threat itself. I mean, I think you told a story, what was it, last week or the week before, about all the times you'd, raised your gun and in a stress situation, you remember seeing the sights once, because you're focused on the threat naturally. I mean, that's what our brains are programmed to do. And that's actually one of the things I like about the red dot is it totally supports that natural tendency to be looking at, kind of like a laser, similar concept there. So I don't know, I think that's a big benefit.
The time I remember looking at my sights, it wasn't in a hurry. There was a long period of time someone was holding somebody hostage. And what my role at the time was, had very precise aim and I was resting on a car bumper. So then that was all about the sight picture, But other than that, I think something that's important because we see how you can get a gun that looks like this from every manufacturer now, and I think just like every new technology, hollow point ammunition, laser sights, frangible ammunition, all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of regular shooters out there who aren't really insiders like we are will look at this new technology and say, oh, that's going to solve my problems. That's what I need, right? If I buy that, then everything will be okay. And I would like to bring up the fact that if you buy a red dot sight, that's not going to solve all your problems because what do people do? They buy the gun, they put a red dot sight on it, they load the magazine, they maybe don't even shoot it, and now they think, okay, I'm safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we tell them?
How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice.
You beat me to it, man.
Yeah, that's it's so simple, but that seems to be the hardest thing to get through to folks. Whatever you're using, laser, red dot, iron sights, no sights, behind your back, inverted on your head, just practice it until you can hit. That's the simple key. But unfortunately, as Americans, we're so focused on gear, we think that next piece of kit will solve all of our problems in every situation.
And I think that's the thing, Now, Tom, who actually has a lot of insight into this, because we've talked about red dot sights before. And I've practiced just what he says, which is just go practice 5,000 presentations. And what I have noticed in using this gun is having that big TV set on the top that you can look through. You actually can index it pretty fast, even if you don't see the red dot.
Yeah.
In other words, it's almost like you put the target in the TV screen, and you're probably, if you're out to 3 to 5 yards or 12 yards or something, you're probably good enough. And, you're going to hit what you're aiming at. Because I remember when Glocks first came out, they were square in the back. And it was kind of the first real square gun that we really ever had. And the first few times I shot them, I thought, well, there's a square out there. You just put the square on wherever you're shooting, and, and there you go. And so it's a bit like that. So I would say baby steps, right? That was get your red dot, put it on your gun, and now train.
Kind of like a giant ghost ring on a rifle, with the method you just described.
Yeah. And one thing that naysayers on the red dot will always say, well, it's electronic and it can fail and all that stuff. I got to say, because we are, lucky, we've got all different kinds of brands, and I've not carried it as much as, it's not like my everyday carry gun, but other than some of the early EOTechs, which they admit, kind of had a little battery problem, I've not had any issues with them. And, we all understand, co-witnessing now. So what would you say to somebody who says, well, that's just an extra piece of kit that can fail in the moment of crisis?
I would say you need to turn off your electricity and call the power company right now and turn it off. Because think about this. What would happen if you neglected to pay your electric bill, right? The power would go off. And then what would you do, right? You'd be stuck. I mean, I kind of, people say, well, the battery may run out and the light. It's like, well, we're adults. We can change the battery once a year. I mean, this is a Trigicon. This will run per specs nonstop for about 3 years.
Yeah.
So every New Year's Day, every 1 year, I put a new battery. What are they, like $1.97, for one of the batteries that drops into this guy, if that. Yeah. Like, never have to worry about it,
Is that the SRO?
No, this is an RMR.
Okay.
The original.
Oh, I see now.
So I'm kind of jonesing for an SRO like you have there. That got a nice big TV window, right? Absolutely.
It's huge. You can see all kinds of stuff going on downrange.
You know what I have found red dot sights are good for, and I've done it with this ancient revolver one before I got the more modern ones, is that if you have a new shooter, and have you ever been teaching somebody to shoot and they're really just not getting it, they're not getting the trigger press, they're not getting the sight picture, they're jerking the trigger, you're having a little trouble getting them settled in, kind of. Well, I have actually found is give them a gun that has a red dot sight on them, put the target out about 5 or 7 yards, and then just say, all I want you to do is put the little dot on the target and then squeeze the trigger. And so now that takes the sight picture element out of the picture, and you can just work on trigger squeeze. And so now they're only thinking about one thing. And boy, I'll tell you, it's been a really useful tool because their eyes light up because they're getting hits, and as the groups are spread around, you can help them identify what they're doing with the trigger and whatnot. And then once you sort of get that under control, now give them back the gun with the iron sights, and it's 100% successful. It's really, really handy, and I would encourage people to do that. It's don't buy a red dot sight thinking that this is going to solve all your problems. Buy a red dot sight and use it as a training tool for a while, and then, as Tom says, do your 5,000 presentations. And if you get to where you're really comfortable, then okay, that's something else. But
well, they're certainly getting popular. I went out to our range the other day. I was going to use it. I get to use the police range, which is wonderful. They had an out-of-state instructor in there, and there was 12 people in the class, and 8 of them were shooting red dots. And then, like I said, I was at Gunsight last week. They had their very first red dot only 250. So the entry level, week-long pistol class, and it was all red dots, and it was highly successful. So, Roy, you and I guess we need to modernize a little bit because that may be the wave of the future.
Right.
I've heard that before. Huh? Hollow point ammunition? No way.
Well, there's one reason behind all this. Think about all the new pictures you're seeing online about the tactical Delta ninjas grimacing and crushing the grips while holding a red dot pistol. I mean, do you need any other reason than that?
This is true.
Right.
And if you can do position Sewell, you and Dead Sexy Ward.
We don't need to go there right now.
Stance.
It's a shame, though, that dare I call them influencers, that people who are in the business to make money being an influencer are affecting people's decisions, to buy these products, I think they kind of hint at the fact that this is going to solve all your problems. And I think if one of the services we could do is just help to keep people grounded a little bit and just say, always look at that stuff with a wary eye,
Yeah.
Well, not to get off on the influencer tangent, but you and I were talking about a certain person that we dealt with. And you said to me something that really stuck. You said, the world just began 7 years ago for this guy. He had not even shot before that. And now he's got a following. And he's, I'm not saying you have to be military, cop, competition shooter, but just with 7 years under your belt and you're telling literally tens of thousands of people how it should be, good luck with that. That's my thought. How many years between all of us? And I think we would all be the first to say, I've not figured all of it out by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, we got my 7. But and thanks for talking about me there.
Yeah,
and plus whatever you guys have, right?
Well, I think that's a good lesson too. Is that there are people with 7 years in grade who probably know about whatever it is they're teaching.
Yeah.
But I think people have to then balance that with, don't just look at that and say, well, I saw it on YouTube, so it's true. So look at that, and I'll find other people, maybe old guys like us, maybe other younger people. And if there's a common theme amongst them all, then oh, okay, well, then that's probably true, because I think we're all three saying kind of the same things about the red dots. I mean, Tom, who I would say is probably the strongest proponent and arguably probably has the most experience with them between us, still says, well, no, you have to practice with it.
I think it's like scopes on rifles, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many decades ago was that heresy to put a glass object on a working rifle? You're going to what? You're going to put glass up there? How long, serious question, how long do you think it took? I've never really gone back and looked at this for the world to transition from open sights on rifles to scopes. I mean, now it's rare to find a rifle without a scope on it.
Good point.
Was that a decades long process? I don't know.
Oh,
about
yeah,
50 years probably. Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the late 50s when it really started to become pretty much common, when Leupold and Redfield and Weaver and those guys came out. Because remember, they had telescopic sights, no red dots, but they had telescopic sights in the Civil War and even before that.
Yeah.
Mike Venturino still, I think, competes with optics, single-shot black powder rifles.
Yeah.
What should we leave them with? I'll say one. Don't pay $19 for your red dot sight. I mean, as tempting as it is, don't, unless you're going to put it on your BB gun or something like that. I'm thinking a good, decent quality, read the reviews. If people are saying, oh, I got it, it broke in a year, I'm returning it. Don't buy that. But, as Brent says, buy something decent quality, because if you like it, you are going to upgrade later on. For sure.
Yeah.
So, Tom, what advice can you give people with
one thing we hadn't covered yet is think about what you're going to use it for. And what I mean by that is a red dot that you're going to use on a carrier defensive gun. I believe, my opinion, it needs to be some type of always-on technology, period. No button required to turn it on, because you're going to forget. And if you have a manual safety, then now you're talking about multiple steps to be able to aim and fire that gun. So if it's for defensive use at all, either get an always-on, like Trijicon does that, or the SIG Romeos, like this Romeo 1 Pro, is motion activated. And that's how it gets 5 years of battery life. It's when it's laying on a table or in the safe, it's off. But the minute it moves, that dot is, illuminated again. So now if it's for range use or competition or practice, knock yourself out, get one with an on-off switch and all that stuff if you want. No harm, no foul.
Yeah. Well, before I give my tip, I learned a great idea from you is January 1, New Year's Day, after you get up late because you were up late, go change the batteries and everything. And I already do that with my smoke detectors, which everybody should do. But that's a good time to remember that. So January 1, for all of us now, will be battery day. Replace the battery and all your stuff, your life support equipment. So your guns, the lasers, the sights, the smoke detector, anything that might save your life. So that's a great thing. But my tip is the one I always give, which is practice, practice, practice. Just get out and make good practice and then practice some more. It's a perishable skill. So
Here.
Harumph.
You're here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that really enlightening talk about red dots, and now the gun sitting right here on the desk is equipped with a red dot. One of these days, I might even get comfortable with it. And with that, we hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Please tell all your friends, even those gloating liberals. Guns Magazine is @1 in the business, and we're using our decades of friendships to bring you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got questions or comments, please drop me a line. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you don't miss out on anything by subscribing to us on your favorite podcast directory and YouTube. Of course, you can always listen and download our episodes at gunsmagazine.com, and if you could do me a personal favor, I'd appreciate it if you take time to share a favorite episode on your own social media channels. And of course, while you're online, don't forget to check out our sister publication, the venerable American Handgunner magazine at americanhandgunner.com. Finally, before we go, I would like to remind you to check out our sponsor, Kimber Firearms, at kimberamerica.com. That's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of the hardworking staff here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.